Animals is Pink Floyd's 10th studio album, issued in January 1977 as a full-blown concept work. It was recorded throughout 1976 at the band's newly built Britannia Row studios in London, with David Gilmour, Nick Mason, Roger Waters, and Richard Wright producing themselves. On release, it reached number 2 on the UK album chart and number 3 in the US, and is now counted among the group's finest achievements. Inspired by George Orwell's satirical novel Animal Farm, the record transposes mid-1970s British society into an animal fable. Dogs, pigs, and sheep to expose the corruption of capitalism and the erosion of public morals. Roger Waters was the principal writer, portraying ruthless businessmen as dogs, power brokers as pigs, and the obedient masses as sheep. Unlike Orwell's story, however, the sheep eventually overthrow the dogs, turning the critique toward Western capitalism rather than totalitarianism. The running order is framed by the brief acoustic piece Pigs on the Wing Parts 1 and 2, inside which sit 3 extended tracks: the 17-minute Dogs, the 11-minute Pigs, 3 different ones, and the 10-plus minute Sheep. Dogs and Sheep began life as the 1974 live numbers, You've Gotta Be Crazy and Raving and Drooling, Rejected from Wish You Were Here. Waters wrote Pigs 3 different ones specifically for this album. Sonically, the band pivoted from the lush, polished sound of prior LPs to a raw, aggressive rock approach. Waters tightened his musical grip, while keyboardist Richard Wright, who earned no writing credits here, later confessed he disliked the album's harsh edge. The music still shows prog rock scale, but with a harder, more direct attack, often read as Pink Floyd's sideways response to the burgeoning punk movement. True to the title, animal sound effects pepper the mix. Gilmour uses a talk box to make his guitar grunt like a pig in Pigs, 3 different ones, while Sheep features bleating and a vocoder parody of Psalm 23. The now iconic sleeve depicts a giant inflatable pig, nicknamed Algie, floating between the chimneys of Battersea Power Station on the Thames. Conceived by Waters and designed by Hipgnosis, the December 1976 photo shoot infamously went awry when the 12-meter balloon broke free, forcing Heathrow Airport to halt flights and summoning the RAF. Found a day later in Kent after frightening a farmer's cows, the runaway earned front-page headlines. The final cover composites the first day's dramatic sky, with the third day's successful pig shot. Upon release, Pink Floyd mounted their largest ever In the Flesh tour. Backed by guitarist Snowy White, they played Animals in full alongside Wish You Were Here. A colossal pig balloon flew above the crowd during Pigs, amplifying the album's satire. White also linked Pigs on the Wing Parts 1 and 2, with a guitar solo that later appeared on his compilation Gold Top. The tour ended on 6th of July 1977 in Montreal, where a frustrated Waters spat at a rowdy fan, an incident that sparked the concept for the wall. Waters has said Animals signaled the end of the old Pink Floyd, both musically and personally. Written and sung by Waters, this 90-second acoustic opener, essentially a love song to his new wife, Caroline, offers the album's lone, warm, positive moment. Its bare arrangement, just vocal and acoustic guitar, was meant to offset the sprawling epics that follow. Part 1 opens the LP, Part 2 closes it. On the 8-track cartridge, they were joined by Snowy White's linking solo. Words by Waters, music by Gilmour and Waters. At 17 minutes, this dramatic centerpiece fills the original side A. Reworked from 1974's You've Gotta Be Crazy, it skewers corporate predators, who climb the ladder only to drown in loneliness. Gilmour and Waters share lead vocals. Gilmour's lengthy, harmonized solos are highlights. The arrangement shifts from fast acoustic strumming in D minor to a halftime 64 dirge, complete with processed dog howls. In studio, Gilmour played much of the bass live. The song became a nightly showcase on the 1977 tour and remains a fan-favorite Waters solo feature. Written by Waters, this 11-minute blues rock workout lampoons 3 kinds of pigs, corrupt elites, then opposition leader Margaret Thatcher and morality crusader Mary Whitehouse. The recurring taunt, "Ha ha, charade you are," ridicules their hypocrisy. Gilmour's talk box, oinking solo, played on a 6-string bass, stands out. In 1977, Waters shouted a different number each night. During the song to tag bootleg recordings, Modern solo tours have revived it with pointed political visuals. Written by Waters. Closing the album with a ferocious climax, this revamped version of 1974's Raving and Drooling depicts docile masses who awaken and overthrow their oppressors. After a pastoral Rhodes intro with distant bleats, the track erupts mid-song. A vocoder delivers a dark parody of Psalm 23. Gilmour handled bass in studio, while live versions extended. Richard Wright's majestic organ coda and featured green lasers and flying sheep props. Commercially, the album hit #2 in UK and #3 in US, moving several million copies even without singles. Critics were split. NME called it extreme and remorseless. Rolling Stone deemed the band sullen. Judgments colored by the rise of punk, which painted long-form prog as outdated. Over time, Animals gained stature as an underrated masterpiece. Its aggressive sound inviting social commentary inspiring later heavy and progressive metal acts. In 2022, a long-awaited Animals 2018 remix finally appeared, earning fresh acclaim. The Flying Pig became an enduring rock icon, while Battersea Power Station achieved landmark status partly through the sleeve. Waters continues to perform Animal songs, arguing their themes of greed, hypocrisy, and mass complacency remain as relevant today as in 1977. Ultimately, Animals marks a creative peak and pivotal rupture in Pink Floyd's history. A fearless fusion of scathing satire and ambitious sound that still speaks powerfully across the decades.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, the fascinating, often misunderstood world of a pivotal album from one of rock's most iconic bands. It's an album that charts the dark undercurrents of society using animal metaphors and boasts one of the most memorable album covers in music history.
We're talking about Pink Floyd's 10th studio album, Animals, released back in 1977. And, while it may not have the astronomical sales figures of its predecessor, The Dark Side of the Moon, or its successor, The Wall, it's an album that has steadily grown in critical stature. It remains incredibly potent today.
Precisely, and it's that nuanced reputation, often overshadowed by their blockbusters, that makes it such a compelling subject for a deep dive today. Our mission is to truly unpack this complex and compelling work for you. We'll explore its origins, its biting social commentary, the incredible musical details within each track, and, well, a pretty wild story behind its iconic cover.
Yeah, we'll also discuss its initially sort of mixed reception, how it found its place as maybe a hidden masterpiece, and why its themes continue to resonate so powerfully, over 45 years later. You'll discover why this isn't just, another rock album, but a profound statement that still speaks to the complexities of modern society.
Okay, so to truly grasp Animals, we need to lay out its foundational elements. Let's start with where and when this album took shape. It dropped in January 1977, the band's 10th studio album. And interestingly, it was self-produced by the band members, David Gilmour, Nick Mason, Roger Waters, and Richard Wright at their own newly built Britannia Row studios in London throughout '76.
Right. And what's really at its core, its main inspiration, is George Orwell's classic satirical novel Animal Farm. However, and this is key, Pink Floyd didn't just rehash the book. Waters adapted its allegorical framework to critique 1970s British society, particularly Western capitalism.
That's a crucial distinction, not just rehashing Animal Farm, but applying its framework to contemporary Britain. So how did Waters specifically translate Orwell's original critiques into his own commentary on society back then?
Well, instead of focusing solely on totalitarianism like Orwell, Waters zeroed in on social decay, moral degradation. He used these specific animal archetypes that quickly became iconic. You've got the dogs, representing the elite businessmen, driven by self-preservation, ruthless ambition. Then the pigs, the corrupt authority figures, and the sheep, who embody the obedient, conforming masses.
And here's where it really diverges from Orwell, isn't it? Because unlike the original, in Animals, the sheep eventually rise up. They overthrow the dogs. That twist makes it a much more direct, pointed criticism of Western capitalist society.
Indeed, absolutely. And this album also marked a pretty significant shift in the band's internal dynamics. Roger Waters really took the lyrical and compositional lead here, and you can feel it. And the sound itself moved away from their previous, elaborate atmospheric productions towards something more aggressive, a real rock feel.
It sounds like a definite sonic departure. departure. What was the internal band reaction to this new direction, particularly from someone like Richard Wright?
Well, Richard Wright, the keyboardist, he actually expressed his dislike for the very aggressive sound, as he put it. And it's pretty notable that he had no song credits on the album at all, which kind of reflects that internal power shift happening. This heavier, more direct approach was even seen by some critics, maybe unfairly, as an unwitting response to the burgeoning punk rock scene of the time, which was all about stripping things back.
Right, the timing. And the album structure itself is unique, too. It's framed by these two short acoustic pieces, Pigs on the Wing, Part 1 and 2, which bookend 3 sprawling, lengthy tracks. The 17-minute Dogs, the 11.5-minute Pigs, very different ones, and the over 10-minute Sheep.
Long tracks.
And it's interesting how 2 of these, Dogs and Sheep, actually evolved from unreleased songs, You Gotta Be Crazy and Raving and Drooling, that they'd actually been playing live since '74.
Yeah, they'd been workshopping those ideas for a while.
But Animals isn't just about the music, is it? Its visual identity, that iconic album cover, has a story just as compelling as the tracks themselves. The cover art, conceived by Roger Waters and designed by Hypnosis.
It's the legendary Hypnosis, yeah.
Features a giant inflatable pig, nicknamed Algie, floating between the chimneys of London's Battersea Power Station.
And what's truly fascinating is the chaotic story behind that photo shoot. It wasn't straightforward at all. In December 1976, they attempted to fly this huge 12-meter-long pig balloon. But on the first day, it just wouldn't float properly, so they only got shots of the power station itself.
Okay, frustrating start.
Then the next day, the pig broke free from its moorings and just floated away over London.
You're kidding. A giant pink pig just drifting across the London sky? That must have been quite a sight.
Oh, absolutely. It caused temporary flight delays at Heathrow Airport. The Royal Air Force was even scrambled, and it ended up landing way out in a farmer's field in Kent. The farmer reportedly called the police, complaining that a pink pig is terrifying my cows.
You can't make this stuff up.
You really can't. And this wild story isn't just, a funny anecdote or publicity coup, though it certainly was that. It's a brilliant example of how unexpected chaos can become an indelible part of an artwork's identity. It forever links the accidental with the iconic image we all know.
That's a brilliant way to put it. It really underscores how artistry isn't always about flawless execution, but sometimes about adapting and making magic out of the unexpected. And that visual artistry extends to the album's sound, too, right?
Yeah.
The animal sound effects woven in.
Definitely. They're expertly woven throughout the record, like David Gilmour using a talk box on pigs, 3 different ones, to create those pig-like guitar solos.
Unmistakable sound.
Yeah. And you also hear sheep bleating in Sheep, which even features a vocoder processed parody of a biblical psalm. It's quite something.
Okay, let's really get into the individual tracks then, because this is where the Animals concept truly comes alive. We have to begin with Pigs on the Wing, Part 1.
Right, the opener. It's this short acoustic song, just about 1.5 minutes long, sung by Roger Waters, just him and an acoustic guitar. And it serves as the album's, unexpected emotional anchor. Waters himself stated that without this track, the album would have been, in his words, just a scream of anger. Because he wrote it as a love song to his then newlywed wife, Caroline, it provides the only truly positive, warm tone on what is otherwise a pretty bleak album.
It's so simple, isn't it? Just acoustic guitar and vocals. No drums, no electric guitar. But that minimalism makes the contrast with the epic tracks that follow even more powerful. And speaking of unexpected connections, it's fascinating that on the 8-track cassette version of Animals, remember those?
Oh yeah, the 8-track.
Part 1 and Part 2 are actually connected by a guitar solo from their touring guitarist, Snowy White. This version even saw an official release later on one of White's compilation albums, a little collector's item.
That's a great detail.
Okay, next up we move to the 17-minute behemoth, Dogs. Longest track on the album, occupying the entire A side of the vinyl. This one's all about those ruthless, power-hungry elite businessmen.
Yeah.
The Dogs.
Yeah, and the lyrics here, which Waters crafted from that earlier song, You've Gotta Be Crazy, they sharply criticize how in capitalist society, this sort of twisted, ravenous greed can become the accepted normal. It speaks of the coldness required to climb the ladder, seeing others as just easy meat, and the ultimate loneliness that even the supposed winners face at the end. It's a chilling warning. It's not just a jab at the powerful, but maybe a reflection on how we ourselves can become complicit in that system.
Absolutely. And musically, Dogs is just a masterclass in progressive rock. David Gilmour's guitar work is the absolute highlight for me. Those long, aggressive riffs, the mournful melodies, especially that epic twin lead harmonized solo in the second half. Just incredible. And And Gilmour even handles the lead vocals in the first half. It's his only lead vocal on the entire album, before Waters takes over that lower, more spoken, almost menacing tone for the later verses.
The song's structure is incredibly dynamic, too. It starts with those fast acoustic guitar strums and gradually builds to this powerful full band sound. Then the midsection features a tempo drop, eerie synthesizers, and incredibly, the sound of dog barks seamlessly integrated. Some are even processed through a vocoder, which is wild. You can even hear a little sample from their earlier song Sea Mist tucked in there. It really brings the animal metaphor to life sonically.
It really does. And a little known detail for you listening. On the studio version, Gilmour actually played some of the bass guitar parts on Dogs. Waters focused on acoustic guitar and synths for parts of it. It just shows their versatility, swapping roles for the good of the song.
That's interesting, yeah. They were clearly pushing themselves in the studio.
So from the sprawling dogs, we shift focus to pigs, 3 different ones. Another lengthy track over 11 minutes, where Waters really sharpens his satirical blade, taking aim at 3 distinct types of pigs, or authority figures.
Yeah, this is where the satire gets incredibly direct, almost confrontational. Waters, keeping contemporary British society firmly in mind, skewers a generic corrupt businessman in the first verse. Then he singles out Margaret Thatcher, who was the opposition leader at the time, in the second verse. Quite pointed.
Very pointed for the time.
And the third verse famously targets Mary Whitehouse. She was a moral reform campaigner, very vocal, who fiercely opposed explicit media and rock music. Waters even had to clarify later that Whitehouse in the lyrics referred to her, not the American presidential residence.
His vocal delivery on this track is absolutely venomous, isn't it? Almost a shout, especially with that repeated mocking refrain, "Ha ha, charade you are." It really captures the album's pervasive sarcasm and anger.
Totally. And a major musical highlight here is David Gilmour's guitar solo again. It's the first instance of Pink Floyd using a talk box effect.
Yeah.
And Gilmour just expertly manipulates it to make his guitar sound like actual pigs oinking. It's such a unique and memorable moment.
Truly iconic sound.
And in the studio, Gilmour even played a 6-string bass on this track, adding to its heavy, driving sound. Lots of instrumental experimentation.
And the live performances of this song became legendary too. On the 1977 In the Flesh tour, Waters would apparently shout a different number each night during the song, supposedly as a way to identify bootleg recordings from specific shows.
Clever. And of course, the giant inflatable pig balloon algae suspended over the stage with spotlights for eyes. That became a recurring visual trademark for the band and later for Waters' solo shows. That pig just kept coming back.
It really did. It makes you wonder, how does protest art like this song continue to adapt and stay relevant across generations?
That's a great question. Because Waters has continued to perform pigs in his solo career, he's even used it to directly lampoon contemporary political figures in recent tours, including the former U.S. president. And he's openly expressed his surprise that after, quote, 50 years of listening to my songs, there are still people who don't understand their political intent. It speaks volumes about the song's enduring relevance, I think. How these archetypes just seem to persist.
It really does. Okay, finally we arrive at Sheep, another 10-minute plus track that serves as the album's explosive climax. This is where the sheep, the obedient general public, finally awaken and rebel against their oppressors.
That's right. The song's origin was actually a 1974 live jam called Raving and Drooling, but Waters entirely rewrote the lyrics for Animals. It narrates this journey from passive grazing to a violent uprising, with the sheep declaring triumphantly, "Have you heard the news? The dogs are dead."
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Waters' message here feels complex. While it's a cathartic moment, the weak overthrowing the powerful, it also seems to hint at the tragic folly of blind obedience and maybe the inherent violence and madness that can accompany such a revolution. It's not just a simple good versus evil tale, is it? It feels more like a warning about cyclical power dynamics.
I think that's spot on. And musically, Sheep is another masterclass in dynamic contrast. It opens with the tranquil sounds of Richard Wright's Fender Rhodes piano, very pastoral, but subtly blended with distant sheep bleats, creating this pastoral yet unsettling atmosphere right from the start. Then Waters' pulsing bass line enters, and Nick Mason's drumming gradually builds the tension throughout the track.
And here's where it truly gets immersive and maybe a bit chilling. In the middle of the song, the music abruptly stops, and you get this mechanical vocoder monologue. It's a cynical parody of Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd," twisted into these dark satirical lines like, "He maketh me to hang on hooks in high places, he converteth me to lamb cutlets."
Yeah, it's incredibly dark humor. In the studio, it was Waters' voice processed through the vocoder, But live, interestingly, it was drummer Nick Mason who delivered that unsettling recitation through the vocoder.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. And after that eerie interlude, the music just explodes into this furious climax. You've got Gilmour's sharp guitar riffs, Wright's pounding organ, Mason's driving drums. As Waters cries out his victory declaration, the album then fades out with the sounds of sheep again, completing that narrative loop and leaving you to ponder the implications.
Okay, so moving beyond the individual tracks now, let's look at the broader impact and legacy of Animals. While it was a commercial success, reached number 2 in the UK, number 3 in the US, it was initially met with pretty mixed critical reception, wasn't it?
It really was. Some critics found it gloomy, even tedious or morose. Publications like NME and Rolling Stone gave it quite harsh reviews at the time, and this was largely due to the music landscape of the mid-70s. You had the explosive rise of punk rock, which often dismissed lengthy, intricate, progressive rock like Pink Floyd's as, old-fashioned, bloated dinosaur rock.
Right, the context is important.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, Nick Mason noted that while they weren't directly influenced by punk, the movement did sort of inspire them to try a faster, simpler approach to recording Animals.
But as the years passed, Animals' reputation steadily grew. It's now widely considered an underrated hidden gem, maybe, with many critics and fans arguing its content rivals that of the mega hits like The Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall. Why do you think this reevaluation happened over time?
Well, I think partly it's because its themes proved to be so timeless, so prescient in a way, and the complexity of the music, maybe it took time for people to fully appreciate it away from the shadow of punk. This reevaluation was also significantly boosted more recently by the release of Animals' 2018 remix in 2022, marking its 45th anniversary.
Ah, yes, the remix.
Yeah, the release itself was actually newsworthy because of delays, apparently caused by some disagreements between Waters and Gilmour. But the remixed version itself was widely praised for its improved sound quality, and it really brought the album back into the spotlight for a whole new generation.
So what does this all mean for other artists? Has Animals' sharp social criticism and heavy sound influenced subsequent musicians?
Oh, definitely. Particularly in heavy rock and progressive metal, you can hear its echoes. Nick Mason even mused once that the album unintentionally lit the fuse for the rise of melodic metal, which is an interesting thought. Bands like Porcupine Tree, for instance, explicitly cite Pink Floyd, and Animals specifically, as a major influence on their darker, heavier sound.
And the album also left a massive cultural footprint beyond just music. Right, that pig.
Oh, the pig. The flying pig became an absolutely iconic symbol in rock history. It reappeared frequently in Pink Floyd concerts, then in Waters solo shows. It just kept flying. It's even entered popular culture as a metaphor for the impossible, the phrase, when pigs fly. And the Battersea Power Station itself became world famous largely because of that album cover. The pig even reappeared, hovering over it again on the remix cover years later. A true visual testament to its lasting power.
But perhaps most powerfully, the actual themes of Animals resonate just as strongly today, maybe even more so, over 45 years later. The original context of inflation and social unrest in 1970s Britain, well, it mirrors many modern societal challenges we see around the world.
Absolutely. Roger Waters himself has said, quote, "The world now is very similar to then, and the story of this album still appeals to modern people." His continued performances of Animals songs in his solo tours, often with updated political commentary targeted at current figures, it just underscores the album's timeless relevance. It's a remarkable example of how a work of art can transcend its original context and continue to challenge us across generations, forcing us to look at the power dynamics around us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that Pink Floyd's Animals stands as a truly uncompromising and almost prophetic work. It was definitely a creative peak for them, but also a moment when those internal band tensions really began to surface, making it a pivotal turning point in their history.
Yeah, initially misunderstood, maybe even dismissed by some. Its uncompromising concept and its raw musicality have rightfully earned it a place as a quintessential rock masterpiece. It's really a testament to the power of art, how fact-based satire and musical ambition can fuse to create something so enduring.
Animals truly proves that some artistic statements aren't just for their time, but continue to demand our attention and provoke thought for decades to come.
So as you reflect on this, maybe consider, what animals, what archetypes do you see dominating our world today, and what messages are being shouted or perhaps whispered for the sheep to finally hear?
Join us next time for another deep dive where we'll continue to uncover fascinating nuggets of knowledge and insight just for you.
I When you think of Pink Floyd, your mind probably jumps to Dark Side of the Moon or The Wall. But what if I told you that in between those two giants, they released one of their angriest, most ferocious, and frankly, most important albums? It was a huge hit, but at the time, a lot of people just didn't get it. Today, we're unpacking Animals, an underrated masterpiece that might just be more relevant now than ever before. Let's get into it. To really understand this album, you have to start with that cover. I mean, it's one of the most iconic images in rock history. You've probably seen it, even if you've never heard the music. So, what's the deal with the flying pig? How on earth did a giant inflatable pig end up floating over a London power station? Well, the story is pure rock and roll chaos. And this whole brilliant, crazy story kicks off with a photo shoot that went, let's just say, spectacularly wrong. And then somehow, spectacularly right. Okay, so get this. The plan was to float this massive, 12-meter inflatable pig, they nicknamed him Algie, between the chimneys of the Battersea Power Station. Day one, a total bust. Algie just would not inflate. So all the crew could do was photograph the power station against this incredible moody sky. Day two, success. Algie is flying. But then, the ropes snap. This giant pig just sails away, right into the flight path of Heathrow Airport. Seriously, flights were grounded, chaos ensued, the whole 9 yards. It eventually crash-landed in a farmer's field in Kent, terrifying his cows. You'd think that's a disaster, right? Nope, it was a PR goldmine. The story was everywhere. On day 3, they finally got their shot with a backup pig, but the sky was kind of dull, so they worked some studio magic. They took the perfect pig from day 3 and composited it onto that amazing sky from day 1. And boom, an icon was born. Now that flying pig wasn't just a random cool image. No, it was a symbol for the whole album's powerful concept. A concept that took its cues from a literary classic, but gave it a really crucial modern twist. You've probably heard that the album is based on George Orwell's Animal Farm. And it is. But where Orwell was satirizing totalitarianism, Roger Waters was aiming his fire squarely at what he saw as the moral decay of 1970s Western capitalism. And this creates one massive difference in the story. In Orwell's book, it's relentlessly bleak. The oppressed are doomed from the start. But in Pink Floyd's version, there's this little glimmer of violent hope. The oppressed actually fight back. So who are the players in this bleak vision of society? Let's meet the cast of characters. In Waters' world, society is split into 3 classes. First, you've got the dogs. These are the cutthroat, hyper-competitive executives, the ones climbing the corporate ladder no matter who they have to step on. Then, on top, you have the pigs, the wealthy, hypocritical, corrupt leaders, the politicians and so-called moral authorities telling everyone else how to live. And then there's the sheep. That's the rest of us, really. The manipulated, complacent masses who just kind of follow along. Well, that is, until the very end. Now, as angry as all this sounds, the album isn't entirely hopeless. It's actually bookended by a tender 2-part acoustic song called Pigs on the Wing. It was a simple love song Waters wrote for his new wife, Caroline. And as he said himself, that little song acted like a shield. Without it, the album would have just been a scream of rage. It's this idea that personal connection, that love, is maybe the only real refuge from the whole mess. And the music itself totally reflects this whole structure. This is not the lush, spacey Floyd of Wish You Were Here. The sound of Animals is raw, it's aggressive, almost punk in its own way. You've got these 3 long, biting rock epics, songs they'd actually been playing with for years, that form the core of the album. And they're all framed by those 2 short, fragile acoustic pieces. It's a stark, direct sound that perfectly matches the anger in the lyrics. It all comes together in the songs, starting with the 17-minute monster, Dogs. This is the only song on the album where David Gilmour sings lead, and his voice just perfectly captures that character's mix of weariness and ambition. And here's a fun fact, while Roger Waters was the band's official bassist, a lot of the bass parts you hear on this track were actually played by Gilmour. Then we get to Pigs. Here, Waters takes direct aim at figures of authority, famously calling out moral crusader Mary Whitehouse. But the thing everyone remembers from this song is that sound. You know what I'm talking about, that squealing solo. It's not a pig, it's not a synth, it's David Gilmour, brilliantly using a talk box to make his guitar literally oink and squeal. It's an incredible piece of musical mockery. And then there's sheep. This is where the whole thing boils over and the masses finally revolt. But right in the middle, the music drops out and you hear this chilling, twisted parody of the Bible's Psalm 23, recited through a vocoder. Instead of, "The Lord is my shepherd," you get this robotic voice describing the sheep being led to slaughter. It is an absolutely unforgettable, subversive moment that just nails the album's pitch-black humor. All that fury and alienation that fueled Animals, well, it didn't just stop when the album was finished. It spilled right out into the real world on the tour, leading to one specific moment that would change Pink Floyd forever. So the In the Flesh tour was massive. We're talking huge stadiums, giant inflatable props. They were bringing the whole world of Animals to life. But Roger Waters started to feel completely disconnected from the giant, rowdy crowds. He felt like they weren't really listening, like they were just there for the party. This tension finally exploded at the final show in Montreal, and agitated Waters actually spat on a fan in the front row. He was immediately horrified by what he'd done, and that feeling of a metaphorical wall between him and the audience, sparked an idea. What if, he thought, I built a literal wall on stage? And just like that, in that moment of disgust, the entire concept for their next album, The Wall, was born. It's crazy to think Animals was the catalyst for one of the biggest rock albums of all time. But the album itself had its own strange journey, going from being misunderstood by critics to being worshipped as a classic. You gotta remember, this came out right in the middle of the punk rock explosion. So for a lot of critics, Pink Floyd and their long, complex songs seemed totally out of touch. The NMI called the album sleep-inducing. Rolling Stone found it sullen and morose. The reviews were just not good. The general feeling was that Pink Floyd were dinosaurs. But the fans, the people actually buying the records, they completely disagreed. The album was a huge commercial success. It hit number 2 in the UK and number 3 in the US. The public clearly connected with its power and its message, even if the critics didn't. And over the decades, the critics finally came around. Animals is now widely seen as one of Pink Floyd's absolute greatest achievements. It's often called their lost classic, a powerful, forward-thinking piece of work that's just as vital as their more famous albums. And this whole reevaluation was really sealed in 2022, when a stunning new remix of the album was finally released after years of delays. It brought this incredible new clarity and punch to the music, introducing it to a whole new generation and cementing its status as an absolute masterpiece. So why does a cynical, angry album from the 1970s about pigs, dogs, and sheep still hit so hard today? Well, the legacy of Animals is just immense. It gave us Algie the Pig, a true icon of rock rebellion. It made Battersea Power Station famous worldwide. For Pink Floyd, it was the end of one era and the very clear beginning of the next. But its most powerful legacy, the reason it still feels so potent, is that its themes of greed, social division, and the hypocrisy of power, they feel like they could have been written yesterday. And that leaves us with one final, pretty uncomfortable question. Roger Waters has said he thinks the world today is frighteningly similar to the one he described back in 1977. So when you look around, you have to ask yourself, almost 50 years later, are we still living in the world of Animals?